And we are live on AUS Property Investors Wednesday night. We bring the big names. We had the big fun. And this week we've got the big beard. We've got Mr. Steve Palise. How you going? And he's checking it for crumbs later on. How you going, buddy?
I'm good. I actually did start cooking. I did have crumbs in my beard.
Yeah, I don't know what that feels like, but thank you. Yeah, so I'm excited. We're just going through all the spreadsheets and all the data. We need the comments, the questions, the thoughts. There's going to be heaps of value, heaps of insights. And for those watching on YouTube at a later date, please smash the like, do all that sort of good stuff as well. So how you going, Joe, as well?
I'm very good. I just can't wait to see Steve in, I don't know, about 30 years as Santa, and just in some mall.
I'm not allowed within 30 meters of primary schools or children, so that's not going to happen.
Oh, jeez.
You're in a different country now. It's fine. The same rules don't apply. Oh, God. No, I'm very good, mate. I'm very excited for this one. This is not, who are you, Steve? What are you doing? How are you? Tell us about this. No, this is a pure data deep dive. And this one's more for people that are really interested in commercial property, but also really interested into property data. And yeah, I'm pumped. I'm excited. What about you, Jeff? How are you feeling about the day?
Yeah, feeling good. Today was beautiful weather, exciting times, and just loving all the AUS property stuff and everything that's going on. So let's. But I think though Steve isn't necessarily just about commercial. He does. I think you do resi at some stage. Or anyway, but yeah, this is going to be commercial.
Yeah, Jeff, I've purchased over like 800 residential properties.
Yeah, there you go.
He doesn't know anything either.
So quite a few. But love commercial. Change everyone buy commercial. No more resi.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, so that's fantastic. So let's kick on to the quote of the week. So we're going to let our guest, Mr. Palise, go. So what's your quote of the week, Mr. Steve?
All right, I've written this down. All right, my quote is: there are 2 rules for success. Number 1, never reveal everything you know.
Oh. Okay. Is that a Steve original? Or?
No, I stole it off a man.
That's very poignant for today's episode. How much is he going to reveal? And I guess that's kind of our job, Jeff, is to reel out as much as we can and twist his arm until he gives us all the goods.
Nah, you guys know I'm an open book. Anything you ask, I'll try to answer as best I can.
So you're breaking your own quote. Oh, that's all right. My quote's an interesting one. I'll save one to last. You go first, Joe. You go second.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so mine is: we are each a product of the stories we tell ourselves. How cute is that? I love it. I always hear, I hear people all the time, like I hear myself actually right now on the echo. But I hear people saying like, oh, I'm so stupid. I need to do this. I'm the worst at this. I'm like, if you keep telling yourself that, you'll go that way. So I think stop telling yourself you're stupid and, change the narrative.
Similar to Jeff's quote last week, wasn't it? It was like, whether you think you're right or wrong, you are. No, whether you think you can or can't do it, you're right, or whatever it was.
So Henry Ford one. That was the quote. And speaking of echoing, if somebody messaged me last week and said that they heard an echo. So if anybody else hears an echo, let me know. Or maybe like a one-hand clap. I don't know. But yeah, no. So I think this sounds fine, but let us know. We can sort that out. My quote is actually it's an interesting one. I don't know how it applies, but I always wanted to say this quote, and it's by Einstein. So it's probably not his greatest, but he said 2 things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the universe. So, I mean, there we go. That's my quote of the week. I don't know. So I'm kind of saying that people are kind of stupid. I just see it every day in, day out. At the same time, I think there's so much potential. So I suppose that quote's about, it kind of dovetails off Joe. I mean, I'll come up with a better quote next week, I promise.
I remember this is an aside, but I was in Penrith Plaza and they had food. They had food quotes all over. So they had like Jamie Oliver, they had like Gordon Ramsay, and then there was random Einstein quote that had nothing to do with anything, but it said, if you spend 30 seconds with your hand on a stovetop, if you spend an hour with a beautiful woman, it feels like 30 seconds. But if you spend 30 seconds with your hand on a stovetop, so what the hell does this have to do with food or anything? But anyway, that was
Was Gordon Ramsay's just F hashtag exclamation mark $?
Yes, probably. Exactly. I'm a bread sandwich.
Yeah.
Bringing back like sort of high school memories, Joe. I spent a lot of my time in Penrith Plaza watching movies, going up there with the school folks after school.
We probably were in the same cinema at some stage, mate. There you go.
I know, we know each other. Yeah.
But it's not about Penrith Plaza. It is about our amazing sponsor as well. But however, this is not a sponsored guest post session. This is all about just data deep dive. So let's run into the sponsor of the week, which happens to be Steve Palise. The amazing thing with commercial property investing is that in most cases, it's cash flow positive from...
Oh, no.
There are instances with commercial property investing where you can actually have the property pay itself off over 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. With commercial property, you get massive net yield, so you can expect anywhere between 6 to 10%. And as we've seen in the current boom, these properties not only provide large cash flow, they do certainly grow wildly in value too. Now, with big rewards comes some risk, and this is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. And the way you do that is with expert due diligence. And this is why we highly recommend people hire professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Palise of Palise Property is one such expert. Being a chartered mechanical and structural engineer in a past life, Steve draws on his analytical and mathematical skills to do that expert due diligence for you. With 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers and finding the best properties in the best locations. The mistakes. Steve has actually even written the book on commercial property investing in Australia. And not only is it a bestseller, I believe it to be the most comprehensive in commercial property investing on the market today. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount for our audience of 50%. Click the link below, get a copy today, and start learning and getting on your commercial property investing journey.
There you go, Joe. Well done, mate.
What a man. What a man.
What a guy. Holy dooly.
I don't. It honestly just feels like I'm chatting to a few friends, but let's for those people who don't know, Steve Palise. I'm going to intro him. So he's worked with some of Australia's leading buyers agencies, and you've executed more than 1,200. I reckon it's probably more than 1,300 now. Is it, Steve? Acquisitions of commercial.
That 1,200 is probably a bit of a fluffy number anyway. It was probably 1,156 or something. I just said 1,200.
I'm going to round up.
Okay, so now, so great. So you've essentially bought a whole heap of properties for people, bought a whole heap yourself. So you've got a lot of experience. But tell us a fun fact about Steve that nobody knows.
Fun fact about me that no one knows. I've had an MMA cage fight before.
Jesus.
Oh wow.
Was that in that great fight for is it like a celebrity fighting thing?
Yeah, so it was the first season of a TV show called Wimp to Warrior, where they train someone with no experience for 6 months and then you have a professional cage fight at the end. So,
and you were the other guy. You were the professional who fought the Wimp, right?
No, I was definitely the Wimp, but it's on Fox Sports. If you do a bit of a Google, you can probably find it.
Wow.
Oh my God, that is so good. How did you go?
I knocked him out in the first minute, which was lucky.
I wouldn't want to get in a cage with you. I mean, Jesus,
knocked him out in the first minute. Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Doesn't just buy commercial properties, kills people. Fantastic.
There we go.
Bye from me,
Yes. This is how you negotiate with a real estate agent. Choke him out.
Oh, jeez. This is going a whole different direction. So now that we've gotten the fun fact about Palise, I should ask every guest that, but I don't think we'd get as much as interesting one as that. Tell us about. I know I'm allowed to ask the first property. I'm going to ask it. Screw it. Who cares? So what was the first property? We didn't ask this last time. So what was the first property you purchased? And tell us the story behind it, Steve.
Yep. So 2012. I was living in. I was living in Northern Beaches at the time, but I grew up in Sydney's West in Wentworthville. So I bought a little house in Blacktown, so western suburbs. Just like everyone else, I knew the area because I grew up there, but that meant nothing. I just meant I knew where the bus stops and train stations and shopping centres were. But perfect time. The market moved at that point, so I bought that for $230,000. That went up about 80 to 100 grand in the first year. And I was just like, I was an engineering intern at the time on like 60 grand a year. And I'm just like, I've just made way more. Like it takes me 5 years to save that type of money. And I was just like, this property investing is easy. And then just kept going. Just bought a couple more. They went really well. And then as I got more and more cocky, I made some mistakes and I bought properties I probably shouldn't have. But as we all have, you learn from those and you regroup and you go from there. But yeah, that's probably worth about 650 at the moment. So not a bad return over kind of 10 years.
Yeah, exciting. Which part of Blacktown? Because I know Blacktown quite well. I mean,
Reservoir Road, so near the
Reservoir. Yeah, interesting. So it's on a main road. You still tripled your money practically.
Yeah, the market moves. But I know a lot of people in this group say, "Oh, you can't buy main roads, yada yada." The price disparity always remains. Like if a house goes to $1 million, it's always just going to be 50, 100 grand cheaper. So as long as
the median house price in Blacktown now is probably somewhere between, let's say, 750, 800, 850.
Exactly right. The main reason you shouldn't be buying main roads is because most tenants don't like it, because they want to be able to get in their driveway. They want to like have kids running around the front yard and things like that. So that's got to do with tenancy, not growth, I think.
Kids running around on the main road. I mean, isn't that you play chicken? Like you never know what's going. I mean, I'm not suggesting you do that. Do not do that, people. I'm not a murdering maniac. I'm sorry. So let's get into. I'm going to let Joe take over now and talk about commercial. But that is an amazing story. Like, how cool is that? Blacktown.
Love a bit of Blacktown. Sensational work. What was your first commercial property?
A cafe in Ipswich. So it's a little freestanding building with 10 car spots next to Ipswich train station. Across the road from the council building, next to Bendigo Bank, 50 metres to the station. Funnily enough, so I found that when I was working as a buyer's agent, and I sent it to multiple clients, and they all said no. So some clients hate Ipswich. They're like, "Oh, I'm not buying there. It's rough as guts, yada, yada, yada." Another one didn't like the tenant because they said cafes come and go too often.
Yeah.
And then I think the other one didn't like the yield, whereas at the time it was like 7.2% net yield and they wanted a 7.6%. So, no, that's I've actually, so I rent 6 of the car spots out now to commuters, and the yield's near, well, at the time it was like 7.6%. So now it'd be even more because we've had some rental increases, development potential. The reasons.
How much do you rent a car space out for per week, or is it per month? What do you?
I do 22 per week for each car spot.
Jeez, it's not bad.
So.
Yeah, but if people need to go to the train station and they have to pay more money in parking, then
$22 a day. It's not a lot of money per day, and you've got it 100% of the time. It's yours, so it works
less
out
than the cost of a coffee.
Yeah. This is why. This is one reason why you use a local property manager as well, because they hook that up. They actually mentioned it to me. They said, "Oh, I've got lots of people that rent these car spots out, and because they're on the ground, they filled 6 of them for me." I'm like, "Oh, that's easy." Whereas if you went a generic one, they probably wouldn't be able to do stuff like that.
Yeah,
very good point.
Yeah, anyway, there's so many questions I have around that, but yeah, and you still hold that one.
Mm-hmm. Still got it. Wow. Still standing there. They're actually so. The Ipswich Council building, they're actually knocking that down and building a whole medical precinct. So that'll get the issue. And this is commercial. This is a whole chat about it. So that's awesome for me long term. It might mean my tenant's going to struggle for the next 2-3 years during construction because all their office workers are now council workers. So I've been chatting with him. He's going to change his menu to like the bacon and egg rolls and the cheaper coffees and try to service that demographic while he's there. But again, I'll work with him if it means a rental reduction, for instance, for a couple of years because he doesn't have the same foot traffic and things like that. But again, that's commercial, and that's the things that you're going to have to look out for.
And what would you do if he's like, "I can't do it anymore, I'm folding"? You've then got this thing here. What would you do with it?
You'd probably just have to wait it out if you can't rent it out. But what will happen is I'll just keep reducing the rent until it is very attractive for him. So like at the moment, I'm getting $33,000 rent out of him because that property actually, funnily enough, is unencumbered. I don't have a debt on it. If for instance, I have to drop it to $15,000 a year, he'll stay there. Like if not, another tenant will come in. So I'll mitigate it. It won't be stupidly cash flow positive, but if it gives me 15, 20 grand a year instead of 33, so be it.
Love it.
Yeah, those are the type of decisions that you can make once it's fully unencumbered.
Yeah, but we'll talk about this later when we're talking about due diligence as well. So this is why some of the clients didn't like it as well, because it is a specialized freestanding building. if the tenant leaves, it's not like a warehouse where a car manufacturer or fabricator, distributor or storage or anything can move in. You're sort of limited to like maybe like a cafe or a bakery or a barber shop or something like that. It's a bit more specialized. So something like that, you'd actually expect to see 1 to 2 years vacancy. And then that scares people as well when you say, oh, 1 to 2 years vacancy. And it is, and it's not one where you can just look at comparables, because I'm a little freestanding building next to these huge office blocks. So what comparisons have I got for vacancy? Whereas residential, you've always got some form of comparables. This one, there's zero. So actually, I shouldn't say this, it was actually a complete thumb suck. It's this probably thing. All I did was I looked back at the last 30 years history of it. And there's a reason why I said barbershop. It was a barbershop, and then it was a bakery. There was about a year to a year and a half vacancy between each of those tenants.
In 30 years?
In 30 years, yeah.
It's not bad. It's probably similar to commercial, resi, I suppose, because you are going to have some, eventually you'll have some vacancy in resi. That's a really cool story. Great. Would you buy the same property now, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, that's my favorite property.
Yeah, there we go. Brayden, if you're watching, Brayden loves Ipswich. He's a big Ipswich fan, so I'm sure he'll be all for it.
Well, one of my questions is about location and asset selection, because I know like buyers agents are very particular, hold all of their locations close to their chest because that's kind of like their IP. Is that the same for the commercial space?
No, I've never held IP, even when I was doing residential. If people are just paying you quite a lot of money for a name of a suburb, like they've got the wrong mindset for investing. They don't realize the value of a buyer's agent. Commercial's a bit different, because residential, once you've chosen your area, you can focus on that for 3 to 6 months and then find a deal that you like and want to go ahead with. Commercial, we go through 200, 300 a week. And of that, we probably narrow it down to about 10 that we think, oh, these might be all right. Then we investigate those and start negotiating some of those. And most of the time we only have 2 or 3 that we kind of go, okay, these might be good ones each week. And they can be anywhere. They could be a Hobart, it could be a Brisbane, could be a WA. There's areas that we generally prefer just because we get good bang for buck. Like I buy quite a lot in Brisbane and Perth at the moment for industrial. And that's just because you're getting the good yields, good returns, and there's low vacancy rates. But it could be anything. I'll show you some deals later. It just depends. Like if I find a medical center in Tamworth, I'm going to have a look at it, even though I wasn't looking in Tamworth.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, right? Like it doesn't matter where it is, because if the yields are there and the growth potential is still around that area, then it's going to be a good buy.
It's hard because growth doesn't just come from the residential growth. It comes from obviously the demand for that type of tenancy. So like if I bought an office in a good residential growth area, I don't think that's going to grow in the next 5 years. If I buy like a Westfield retail shop, I don't think that's going to grow in the next 5 years. But a little freestanding retail shop or one in the local suburban strip shop of 10, that might have demand if the residential population growth is going up, and there's all the other market kind of factors there. So it's very case by case. And I hate when people ask me like, oh yeah, how do you know if it's a good location? It just depends what asset is, what the foot traffic, road traffic, population growth is, infrastructure spending, what the demand for that type of tenancy is. There's so much to it. You do have to do case by case.
Yeah. There's some gems in that. So watch this back, folks, and I'm sure it'll get chopped up into a clip and popped on our Instagram, of course, which I love those clips. Should we get into the case studies, because I think that's what we promised. So should we?
Yes.
Let's do it.
My
question.
Oh, sorry, Karen?
Yes. What the question that I had was like, what's been one of the more interesting purchases that you've made, and you've built a couple of case studies around that. So I'm keen to see it.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to go through the spreadsheets first? I've got about 5 spreadsheets, and that way we can get a foundation for this is how the cash flow and how everything kind of falls out, and then we'll go and take those at the end.
Why are we actually buying?
If you want to see that, put commercial in the comments. I mean, I just want to hack the algo.
FYI for the listeners as well, all these spreadsheets are on my website. They can free. You can have a play. Come back to me, criticize them as much as you want in the group chat, and we'll.
He loves criticism. Yeah,
I do. Actually, as an engineer, like I love being challenged. Just don't call me names or tease my beard, otherwise I get upset.
Yeah, he doesn't handle well. Doesn't sit well with that.
I'll put the link in the comments.
Can everyone see my screen yet?
No.
Not yet.
Jeff. Yeah, we can. Jeff is just.
There we go. All right, let's do it.
There we go. Okay. Oh, look, you've even lined them up.
first one, we're going to just go through typical cash flow on a commercial. So I've kept all these deals exactly the same for all the spreadsheets, just $1 million, just so the numbers make sense and it's easy. If you want to buy 500 grand, it's literally just divide the number by 2. So $1 million commercial on a 6% net yield. So just key takeaway, that's different to a residential yield, because residential yields, you pay for council rates, water rates, maintenance, all that type of stuff. So 6% net equates to $60,000 per year rent off the tenant on $1 million purchase. That's general thing. Depreciation.
So just a quick one on this one, Steve, already. So 6% net yield, what would that be gross? Like, so we can have a bit of a comparison for.
So gross is different because like most leases are net leases. A gross lease would be where they pay you, say, $70,000 per year, but there's $10,000 per year outgoings. So then you work out what the net yield is.
Because the tenants pay most of pay all the outgoings.
Yep, that's right. So the tenants, so that's why there's 0 outgoings, because they're all paid by the tenant. But if you have a gross lease, you have to take this off. The risk with gross leases is if your outgoings go up. So if you've got maintenance or council or water rates go up, you're then effectively eating into your net yield. So a net lease is generally a little bit safer because you're obviously looking out for that. They've got all those risks.
So there you go. So when you see the net yield and the gross yield, that is the main difference.
Yeah. So I get all the time people go, oh, yeah, I can get a 6% yielding residential property. And I go, well, no, that actually equates to like a 2.5, 3% tops once you take out the outgoings.
Yeah.
So,
I'll throw it out there that this is general nature, folks. I mean, I suppose it's not specific.
It's not financial advice.
Yeah. Here we go. You have associates and staff. Jeez, Palise, look at you go.
All right. So outgoings are paid by the tenant. More often than not, the rental management on the bigger deals, rental management is covered by the tenant, but on the smaller ones, it's not. Mainly because the tenants will be like, you can theoretically self-manage as well, but I don't recommend that. It's just kind of too much of a headache. So it's normally between 3 and 7%, depending on how big the deal is. So on $1 million deal, it's probably about 4%. That's the only outgoing you have. So with commercial, most lenders do 30% deposits. There are a few at the moment doing 80% loans, which is really good. Like ANZ have a 2.6% 30-year 80% loan, which is quite attractive for most clients.
They must be quite.
Yeah, go on, Jeff. Sorry.
They must be quite specific on the on the security though. I can't imagine they're doing that for a petrol station. They're probably doing it for a very.
Yeah, so that's the difference with commercial. I've actually got probably more than 50% of my clients are getting that deal at the moment, but they mitigate risk as much as we do. Like they're not going to give you like big loan for an office or a petrol station, and then it's subject to valuation. So there's a few little hoops you have to go through. But have a chat with a commercial broker. There's plenty of good ones in the group. So message out and then get them to assess your capacity and just see. But we'll work off 70% just to be conservative on this one, just to get an idea of kind of cash flows, and then we'll work from there. So you're going to have $60,000 a year rent off the tenant. And then your depreciation at tax time is going to be anywhere from 0 to 5, 10,000. Depends on how new the building is. So I've just chosen a nice low number.
Why is the depreciation so low?
I've just chosen a low one because if I choose a high one, I'm going to get someone in the group say, "Oh, that's too high. I'm only getting $1,000 or 0." Because we might buy an industrial warehouse that's 30 years old. That's going to be 0. If it's 10 years, it's going to be probably 5 to 10 grand. So it just depends on what we're buying, but we'll just keep it just so the numbers are a bit truer.
Yeah. And is this P&I or interest only?
This is just interest only, so we can go into the P&I ones if you want, but let's give it interest only, and we'll talk about that in the next spreadsheet.
Let's do it.
All right. So interest on the loan is 15 grand a year because you've got a $700,000 loan at 2.5%. So 17,500. Your property management per year is 2,400. You don't have any outgoings. So then therefore your cash flow is your rent plus your depreciation at tax time, minus your interest, minus your rental management, and your $41,000 a year positive. So that's cash flow, 40 grand a year in your pocket after all expenses on a commercial. So that's, put that in perspective if you're buying $1 million house in Sydney at the moment and see what type of cash return you're getting, and then compare it that way. most
renting for
residential,
about $200 a week or something.
yeah, most residential investors want 40 grand growth out of their property per year, and we're getting it out of cash. The benefit of commercial is you're not just getting that. If you get a property that grows as well, you can win twofold. But again, we'll talk about the risk. Like obviously, the risk of vacancy is a lot higher with commercial than it is residential. You might lose your residential tenant for 2 weeks. As I explained before, my Ipswich one, it could be a year and a half if you buy something like that.
Now I can see there you've got a 105% loan. Where can I sign up to get this 105% loan?
You've probably already done that on your residential portfolio, and you don't even know it, Jeff.
Yeah, you can sort of collateralize or use.
No, you pull out equity. That's how investment works. People buy a property, it grows, and they pull out 100 grand for the deposit for the next one. That's effectively 105% because you're paying your stamp duty, illegals, all that kind of costs. So you're effectively 100% leveraged on the property.
We're not talking cross collateralization. That's something we try to avoid.
You can do an equity draw and then use it as cash, but effectively you've still got a loan sitting somewhere where there's debt on that. So I need to take that into account. Otherwise, it's not a true number.
I was hoping you had a magic product where you didn't need any other collateral. You just some person was magically giving you 105% loan at 2.5%. I was like, geez, let's have a chat after the show about that one.
So one of the reasons why you generally need a bigger deposit for commercial is because banks are mitigating risk. Like they want, if you can't pay off the debt if it goes vacant, they want to be able to offload that property quickly and get their money back. And generally, a commercial property that's vacant will sell for about 20% less than a tenanted one. So that gives them a little bit of a buffer. So when they sell it, they get their money back and they've covered all the other costs and they move on with their lives. So it's mitigation for them. It's not for you. And that's why you have a bigger deposit.
So most of your clients, well, I don't know about most, but a lot of them would come in that 105% loan situation where they're pulling equity and leverage from another residential or commercial asset that's growing in value and they're ready to start transitioning into the commercial space.
Yeah, a lot. But then there's also ones like self-managed super funds where they've got the cash sitting there, or some exit strategies. People sell a property and they've actually got the cash for the deposit. But in that accumulation phase, you're generally leveraging something else. And that's why I put it in there so you can get a feel for, this is my true cash flow because I've got a debt somewhere else on the property for it.
Yeah. And then you've even got a great example here is if interest rates grow, right? They're at 2.5% in this scenario, but we go up to 4.75. Where are we sitting? 20,
still 25 grand deposit. And this is what I want to talk about because I pretty much every day I have someone say, but what if interest rates go up on your commercial? Even if we don't get rental increases, which generally happens if you have interest rate rises, the rent goes up as well because the rich people never lose. They always pass it on to someone else. But even if the rent doesn't go up, you can see even on a 70% loan at 6%, you're still 15 grand plus positive per year. You do this scenario with residential. If you've got a neutrally geared residential $1 million property and you go 6%, that's going to sting. Where commercial's really going to sting though, if you've got a 6% debt on the property and then you lose your cash flow, so you lose that $60,000 per year, you're then forking out 45 grand a year out of your pocket to support that debt. So you need to be mindful of that when you're doing your buffers and your risk mitigation.
And where does the building insurance sit and land tax?
You're asking questions already.
Yeah, so that's fine. I've just made this illustrative. Like even the things like I'm not taking into account tax that you're paying on this because I don't know what structure you're buying under. You could be under a family trust or you could have a hugely negatively geared portfolio. Land tax, if you're buying, say, something like $1 million warehouse as part of a body corporate, you're probably just under the threshold. So what was the question? It was land tax.
Land tax.
Insurances, typically not that much if you're buying a body corporate. If you're buying a freestanding, the tenant will pay because it's an outgoing. So you can pass that on to them 95% of the time. So you actually don't have many outgoings with these because most of them are body corporate in that lower end, unless they're freestanding, but then it's passed on.
So I know you're not a commercial conveyancer or even a conveyancer, but what is your, with commercial land tax wise? We know you're not an accountant, I suppose. How does that work across the states? Do they have, what's the land tax kind of thresholds look like generally?
It's pretty much the same as the residential, like most of between. The accountant can correct me, but most of them between 400 and kind of 650 kind of land value. But you got to remember, on $1 million property, especially if it's like a warehouse, the land value is probably only 500,000. Like rule of thumb, about half is a general sweet spot. So you're probably minimal. If they're buying a property where that property alone puts you over the threshold, that's when typically the tenant will pay the outgoing. It's an outgoing, so they'll pay the land bill as well.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's super useful.
Yeah, but you can't go out and buy $300,000 ones and then hit one of them up to pay your land tax bill. Yeah.
Pay your land tax bill. Okay, but it goes over that threshold.
Caveat on this though, commercial, you can basically negotiate whatever you want. So like you can have any details you want in a lease. Retail Leasing Act, there's a few rules where you like retail, you can't pass on the land tax. That's one of the rules of the Retail Leasing Act. But like an industrial, you can negotiate anything. And as long as you're typically making sure whatever they're paying out of their pocket is in line with fair market value, you're going to be okay.
And what are some of the crazy things that you've seen in a lease? You say negotiate anything. Well, I bet you've seen some crazy stuff.
It's not so much in the lease. It's what happens when you start having like subleases or there's just like under the table agreements and things like that. So like, for instance, like the cafe, my cafe during COVID, I gave him a 1 month rental concession. I shouldn't say it's probably not live, but I didn't go back and put that on the lease. My money that he puts in my account effectively every month was there's nothing for that month. So that's part of the due diligence where you go back and you check the rental ledgers to make sure what they've paid, when they've paid, and things like that. So because it costs money to go get a lease changed, they're not going to get their solicitor involved. You get your solicitor. So there's quite a lot of under the table kind of arrangements you need to check out when you're buying a commercial property.
So again, please, that would promise that there's only about roughly 10,000 people that will end up seeing this. So I'm sure they promise they won't tell anybody.
So that's why I'm
don't tell anyone, guys.
All right, all good with this one. We'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, what are people's thoughts and questions on this one? Like, is this? Check it out on his website. I did put the link in there. So hit Palise up and tell him about how he needs to adjust his.
Throw some questions in. One of mine is around the cash buffer side of things. Like, $44,000 scares me a lot if the tenant goes AWOL, you don't have a tenant for a year. What kind of cash buffers do you have? A general rule of thumb? Like, how do you work that?
Yep. So again, not financial advice, but my general rule of thumb is I generally have a year's worth of capital sitting there if the property's vacant for each property.
So you use rent.
Yeah, well, the rent plus the outgoings. So not actually, no, the interest plus the outgoings. So I have a year's worth of that sitting there so I can handle a year. What I can do to mitigate it so I don't need lots of buffers is all my properties, I stage the leases. So I don't have them all ending in 2023 because then I'd need multiple buffers. Have 122, 123, 125. And that way I actually only have to keep one buffer the whole time. But then it'll still be property dependent. So like my cafe, that one, you probably have a year to 2 years. If I've got a little warehouse where the vacancy periods are like 3 months, I might get away with 6 months. But it's personal circumstances as well. How big your portfolio is, what you do for work, how kind of risk adverse you are, how stable your job is. Everyone should come up with their own buffer. But my one's generally a year. I feel like I'm going to be safe. And again, I don't do it off 6% because I don't see interest rates going from 2.5 to 6% in a year. I change it as time goes on. So if interest rates spike to say 3% in the next year, I'd make my buffer off the 3%.
Right. Good. And are there any tenants? Are there any properties that you run that you self manage, or do you get a property manager for all of them?
I'm always property manager. You can do it yourself, but it's all nice when it's smooth sailing. But when you get to lease negotiations and things like that, why do you not want someone in your corner who knows the market inside and out? And I like having a kind of line in the sand where the agent can be nice guy and I can be bad, unhappy manager, kind of owner of the property. So they can kind of work with the tenant and find out what they like and don't like and things like that. Same as residential. You can do it yourself, but if something goes wrong, like COVID or shutdown or weather causes an issue or and there's a new development going on, I always encourage it for the few $1,000s a year. It's not worth my time. I want it ticking along. Whether or not I get 43,000 cash flow or 45 shouldn't be a decisive factor of why I'm buying commercial property.
And that's the biggest difference there, right? $2,500.
Yeah, so that's right. It's just the cost. It adds up. Obviously, like if you got 5 of them, 10 grand a year, it's all of a sudden stings. But it's just if you've got a good job and you're making money elsewhere, spend your time doing that. Getting a 10 grand pay rise is way more important than doing it yourself.
Yep, definitely. All right, shall we move on to number 2, which I think is I don't know what number 2 is. It's a pay down. Here we go.
Yeah,
pay it down.
This is one where people always kind of call BS on it, but this is just simple, not taking into account tax and all that type of thing. It's just illustrative. It's just a simple kind of pay down calculator. So feel free on the website, download it, have a bit of a play, but same numbers as before. $1 million purchase price, 30% deposit, gives you a $700,000 loan. Stamp duty is about $33,000. So your purchase costs, that's building and pest inspection, property conveyancing and valuation. So you're looking for $1 million property, you're looking about 336 grand acquisition. Net yield, same as before, 6%. I've taken rental increases into account because now we're looking at 10 years. You'll generally get 3 to 7% rental long term. But again, it's not justified, but I do this just to show you kind of increasing capital value as well. Same interest rate, 2.5%. And then this is just simply, we're getting 60 grand rent. The interest on the debt, on that 700 grand debt, is 17,500. So the cash flow, as it was before, 42,500. And then the whole purpose of this spreadsheet is, cool, if instead of spending that cash, if I put it back into this $700,000 debt, what debt am I left with? So then you get $657,000 worth of debt instead of $700,000.
So it's just principal and interest, is it?
No, it's not. It's interest only, but I'm effectively just putting money in. So it is, but a 10-year P&I kind of one. It does get confusing. If you go on like a 25-year P&I loan and then you start paying into extra repayments, it'll make the spreadsheet too confusing. So all I've just done is, cool, there's a debt. I'm chucking this chuck into an offset account and just seeing kind of what happens.
Yep.
What you'll see here, by having a smaller debt, your interest goes down as well because you've got a smaller debt.
Yeah.
Having smaller interest on the loan gives you a bigger cash flow. So your cash flow starts going up. So then you put that $45,000 into the $657,000 debt, it then becomes $612,000. And then
so I see what you're doing. So you're assuming you're taking all of the cash flow and putting it into the offset, is what you said.
Yep. So you just have an offset account, you put all that cash flow there, and then you could theoretically pay the bank down, but it depends what line you're on. If you're like on a lease doc line or a full doc line, it's going to change slightly the arrangement that you do. But again, let's just say offset accounts, so it keeps the spreadsheet simple. Same thing. You can see interest rates. Interest is going down. Your cash flow is going up. And then you keep going along, and then you're going to see after 12 years, there's no more interest. You're debt free, and your cash flow is now $85,000 per year. So you've bought $1 million property, and in 12 years, you're debt free, and you've got an $85,000 passive income. And that's why when a lot of people come to me and they go, "Oh, Steve, I want 100K passive income. It's too hard." You can do it fairly simply with commercial. Like you're not going to be able to get a $85,000 passive income from buying $1 million residential property in 10, 12 years. It's going to be a 20-year kind of process, assuming you get some really good rental increases. So that's the point here. What I show people, if you want to shorten that, you can actually put some extra. So if you put some extra savings into the property, let's just say $15,000
a year,
per year, you wipe quite a lot off. Like in 10 years, you're now 76 grand passive income and you're debt free.
Yeah, but if you've got a lease, if you go and purchase a commercial property that is very de-risked and it's got a lease in there for 5 years and it's a very secure tenant, you could be getting 5 years worth of, so we got 42, 45, 49, and then you've got that sat in your offset. So when you do have that new lease renewal, let's say it takes a year, worst case 2 years, you've still got 3 years worth of cash flow in there.
So this is a point I just point out to people when people go, like, say we buy a property, let's keep the numbers round. Let's just say you have $50,000 a year cash flow on the property. In 5 years' time, you're going to have 250 grand sitting there that you've made from that property. Ignoring capital growth, you've just got that sitting there. And I think the point you're making, Joe, is if the tenant does leave for a year or two, yes, you're gonna eat into $30,000, $40,000 worth of interest repayments. you're still $210,000 a year positive. You're still ahead. And that's not taking okay. So that's why when people say, oh, commercial's high risk. No, if you plan it correctly, it can be lower risk. Like I think going out and buying $1 million property in Sydney or Melbourne that costs you $5,000, $10,000 a year to hold, in 5 years' time, you're down 25 grand. And then you're purely basing that on capital growth, where I know I'm getting a decent return without the capital growth. If I have the capital growth as well, then I've won twofolds. I'm de-risking because the $1 million property that I bought is now worth in 5 years' time 1.2 mil. So there's another $200,000 buffer I've got if I need to get out quickly.
Sign me up. I'll take 3, please.
you got $3 million.
No, I need. How much do I need? I need 3.6. I need 900,000 in cashola.
Pay cash. I give you a good price.
Okay. This one? Yes. Okay. So that makes sense. So we're paying this bad boy off very quickly. Now, what's the typical scenario that you kind of see though? Like, I like $1 million. I like 6% net. What's the kind of typical deal that you see yourself doing? And I guess this is going to flow in nicely to the next section. But what do you kind of see that's out there in the real world?
It's going to depend what we choose as well of what the client is. And one of the questions I always get is, okay, cool. Why wouldn't I buy another property in year 4, for instance? And we'll talk about that with the property planning. You can. This is just a simple one-off one. One of the typical scenarios I get from generally my older clients is they want to buy a property and pay it off in 5 years. And then we can do that by either putting in extra repayments because they're getting to retirement age, or they sell one of their properties and we pay it off quickly. And then they just live off the debt. Some of the younger aggressive investors, they're going to keep refinancing this property every chance they get and accumulate and go from there. So it's just going to depend. To answer your question about the deals, 6%, we're still buying that. Yields are compressing at the moment. Like to get 7% plus, you're generally going regional, which generally comes with, again, general rule, generally comes with risk in terms of vacancy. But we're still buying 5 to 6.5% in most capital cities at the moment.
What do you consider regional for a commercial property? Like when we say regional, we talk
anything that's not Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Canberra, Perth.
Okay. So you consider Hobart regional?
Hobart, but again, depends what you buy. If you're buying in the center of town, that's probably not. But Hobart's a funny one. You drive literally 8 minutes and you're out in the sticks.
I know. I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like there's paddocks, there's farm paddocks, like 10 minutes out of Hobart. Like,
yeah, I drove my camper van around Hobart right before COVID actually for a month, and yeah, I was amazed at kind of like how regional it actually feels. Yeah. So yeah, I do that. General rule, don't buy anything in a town less than 20,000 as well. That's just way too high risk. Banks generally won't touch it as well. I like to buy in the 100,000 plus towns just as a rule of thumb. But again, same as residential, fundamentals apply. You need to make sure they've got diverse industry, multi-industries, the population growth, infrastructure, check there's not overdevelopment, vacancy rates, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, but also the supply. So one of the things I'm thinking about here is that commercial property, incoming people, when it comes to population growth, also is a little bit, it affects a lot more. Whereas with residential, if there's a whole heap of supply coming on the market, this town may have 100,000 people coming, but they've also got these 6 greenfield estates that are coming on. Population becomes a lot more important in commercial, doesn't it? Because I guess there isn't always such a glut of supply from a commercial standpoint.
It depends what you're buying though, because I still have to be wary of that. If one of the due diligence checklist items is check what future demand's coming, because if I'm buying on the outskirts of a city and they're going to build another 30 warehouses that are just like mine, good luck getting a rental increase out of that bad boy for the next 5 years because you got too much competition. So it's the same thing residential. You don't go buy on the outskirt where they're building 200 homes because you're not going to get rental increases. You're going to have a high chance of vacancy. You try to buy in those saturated areas. But again, it's case by case. If you've got someone who can handle the slight vacancy and it's a long-term hold and they want the depreciation benefit and they know long-term it's going to be all right. One of the ones I saw, I remember, so I grew up in Sydney's West. When I was a kid, like I'm 35 years old now, Kellyville and Rouse Hill and all areas like that were farmland. And you could buy industrial and residential dirt cheap back then. You could actually buy acres of land for so cheap. If you've got a long-term strategy and you hold those, you've now got $10 million plus worth of property. So again, it's case by case. if you're a normal investor and you need to mitigate risk, buy in the saturated areas. If you're kind of cash rich and you can take a bit more risk and your business is doing well or whatever it may be, you can kind of look at those other opportunities.
Nice. Speaking of that, actually, speaking of people's businesses doing well, because I bet you get a lot of business owners. There's this general rule of thumb of when you start a business, you've got 2 years before you can start to borrow money again. How does it work with commercial property in terms of borrowing funds and obviously, individual circumstances, etc.?
We'll start a thread, I reckon, in the chat for that, because it depends on what type of loan you get. Like you said, it's like residential as well. You generally need to show 2 years worth of statements. Commercial's a little bit different because there are options for lease stock loans where you can just show like one BAS statement and things like that and keep moving forward. Or you can or you can go like no doc loans where you put like a 50% deposit, and they'll, as long as the valuation comes in, they'll basically give you the loan for it. So a lot of those people are using those high deposits. They're the ones that come in with the 30 to 50% deposits just to keep moving forward. But there are options. So I reckon we start a thread in the AUS Property group on that.
Somebody go and do it now, and tag Joe, Jeff, and Palise. Tag us all. Somebody put a post in, because I'm not going to get distracted. Let's go on to number 3, which I think is what is number 3? It's about the ROI, if memory serves me correctly.
Yep, ROI. So
here we go. Jeez, fancy that.
So this
man loves a spreadsheet. We promised you guys spreadsheets, and we are delivering spreadsheets.
I've got no.
You haven't shown us the Deal Crunch calculator created by AUS Property Investors, and probably the most important spreadsheet that you've got. But you can't put your logo on that one.
I have, and I will.
Damn it.
So this is just a quick one. It's just to show you return on investment, because a lot of people compare shares with commercial property, because without capital growth, you're just looking at your return you get from the cash you put into it. So similar to before, $1 million purchase, 30% deposit. That means the deposit's $300,000. Stamp duty is $34,000. Additional purchasing costs, legals, valuation, building and pest inspection, all those typical ones. You're looking at total acquisition costs of $337,000. So that's what you're getting. The cash flow, similar to before, about 42 to 45 grand a year, depending on kind of what interest rate you get on the property. So you're getting 44,000 on your acquisition cost, which is 337,000. So therefore, your return on investment, so that's just cash flow over the amount of money you put in it, simple percentage, 13.2% return on investment. So you guys can have a look at the residential and see if you can compare. That's pretty attractive in terms of a cash on cash return, when most people in shares are trying to get 7 to 12%. Where commercial really shines though is if you get capital growth, because if you also get capital growth, so say 5%, this is just 5% on the purchase price, plus the cash flow over the money you put in the deal, you start getting up to 30% return on investment, which is quite attractive.
Can I be a bit hard and say, can we drop that to 3%? If we drop to 3, how much does it? What's my ROI then?
You're trying to factor in inflation, are you, Jeff?
I mean, inflation is transitory, though, Joe. I mean, if you listen to the end, I mean, what inflation are we talking about? Are we talking about CPI inflation? Are we talking about real inflation? Yeah, so I'm getting off topic.
Again, this is I've got I won't sharp, but the other one gets become. I've got one where you do this ROI over 10 years, and it actually, that number grows massively year on year, because it's the ROI that you originally put on the deal. If this starts growing to say 1.5 mil, and the rent has gone up, the ROI goes up quite a lot as well. So the ROI becomes exponential.
I kind of do want to see it, but I don't know. Can we see it, Joe? Or
I feel like it's a bit too deep. I feel like we're going to go.
If you want, I'll do a post. I'll attach a
break it down.
If people want to do a post on the big ROI, I don't know. Let us know, because the comments have gone a little quiet. So I want to see some engagement. I'm feeling a little alone here.
Yeah,
I want to hear. So this is absolutely amazing. 22% on our money per year is
on a 3% capital growth.
Yeah. Like I said, that grows. That number gets bigger, because if you're having, say, rental increases and then the capital growth, it's exponential. This is why we buy property, because it's compound growth. And then after 5 years, that gets up to 50%. It just gets ridiculously attractive.
I've got a question. Have you ever seen like a commercial property that's actually? I don't think that. I mean, I'm sure it has, but how often have you seen a commercial property go down in value, or have you seen that go?
I haven't seen it too much in the last kind of 5 years since I've been kind of buying quite a lot. This is because the market's been going up. Most of the time that comes from buying a bad investment. So like office space, for instance, you buy a high density office space, that's probably taken a hit in the last couple of years. Most of the time, the numbers I'm seeing, it's about the same, but there will be some areas in the CBDs that are just kind of going to go down in value. But I've never really bought high density office anyway, because for me, it's like buying a high density off the plan apartment. Like you're paying for a bit of concrete in the sky, and oversupply is too easy. If they build a 20-story skyscraper next to you, you're just going to have 300 vacant properties that you have to compete with. So I always try to buy something with a land component, even if it's part of a body corporate. Like buying one warehouse out of 10 warehouses as part of a body corporate, you still got space. You've still got floor space that you own, and you still have that demand. And they can't just come in and build a 10-story warehouse. It doesn't work that way from load capacities.
So I've got a couple of questions. So I know it's case by case, as you've mentioned probably several times, but is there a minimum like floor space you'd look at?
Depends on the client. Generally, 80 square meters is starting point for industrial, that is. But it depends what you're buying. If you're buying some storage space and things like that, it can be anything. But I find 80 is a good versatile, because you can get like a small kind of sole trader tenant, little fabricator or distributor, or even still use it as storage. And I'll show you one of the case studies. It's actually kind of like that. And it's actually got 2 examples in the ones, and that's why I chose it. But 80 square meters would generally be a starting point if you kind of do the real commercial search.
What are your views of the storage units?
It's a business. So I wouldn't go out and probably just buy the one for the sake of buying one. It's fairly one-dimensional. Again, it depends. If it's a storage unit in like an industrial warehouse complex, and you're using...
Oh, no, I mean, well, I guess you've kind of answered the question. It's more of a business purchase where you would buy a lot which has 80 storage units. You're not just going to be able to buy the commercial asset. You have to buy the business along with it.
Yep, that's right. Though you probably could find somewhere you have a property manager, but they're not going to charge you 4%. They're going to be 10 to 20%, kind of like an Airbnb host. But that's very dependent on the business. Most of that business comes from advertising and kind of word of mouth, and you have to know the area and so that. So that's a specialty commercial I put it in the basket as. Same as like with commercial, there's lots of special ones. I get asked like car washes quite a lot. Same thing. You might have someone renting it off you, but it's a very specialized one. You need to understand the car wash industry. Same as like cinemas, theme parks, hotels, motels. They're really specialized. Whereas something like just a standard industrial shed, that doesn't matter. It can be a fabricator or storage or whatever. You don't care kind of who the tenant is, because it's just some concrete walls and a roller door. Whereas the other ones are purpose built. I think Jeff, you sent me a graveyard the other week, which was interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah.
Are you going to do due diligence on that one?
I'm going to have a look if I can over the weekend.
Yeah, there was a lady that commented on it, and it was super. She was like, "Yeah, this is great. Yeah, like I'm keen on this. If you want to go halvesies or you want to get involved, I'm keen to do it." It sounds like graveyards are the place.
I just found that thread went out the window with so many puns.
Yeah. Dead set. Okay. Well, give us some of the locations, mate. I'm excited to see how you actually. I want to see some real world stuff.
No, Joe. One more spreadsheet, sir.
No way.
Yeah.
Haven't we learned enough?
No.
Property plan. We're going to buy more than one. Surely not.
This is for the non-pay down people. So the last one I showed you was called, we can pay off one in 10 years. What if you're 25 years old and you've got the next 10 years up your sleeve before you want retirement? This is the one. So same thing as before, $1 million purchase, 70% LVR, 6% net yield. For this one, we're putting 10 grand a year, because most people that are aggressive with their investing want to put something into their portfolio. They don't just sit there not saving. They're trying to grow their portfolio. So this is a commercial only growth portfolio. I recommend, especially if you're starting out, mix in residential, because you can get 80, 90% loans and you can maximize your leveraging. Whereas this is
sorry, mate. Would you beef this out at the beginning? So property one would be your residential purchase at 90% or 100%?
Yeah. So again, it'd be the residential. The normal, you'll have kind of maybe 3 or 4 until you get into your serviceability. Then you'll shift into this strategy, and the funds for this one would come from a residential refinance.
Okay.
And then you go from there. But again, case by case, like I might have someone who's 45 years old and they want to retire and they're 55 and they don't have a residential portfolio. This might still suit them because they're not that fussed by capital growth. They just want the way out of work. So they want the cash flow. And I've only done 3% capital growth on this property, like Jeff mentioned before. So we're being fairly conservative, not being silly with the cap rate or anything like that. Haven't taken into account vacancy. Obviously, if we have a year's vacancy, this 10-year plan becomes 11 years. If it's 2 years vacancy, it becomes kind of 12 years. So again, just illustrative, just to keep it simple, but it's more just to show, cool, this is what's achievable with some reasonable assumptions. So $1 million property, 60 grand rent, 42.5 cash flow per year, and $10,000 contributions each year. So after 3 years, you can see with the 3% increases, the property value is going up as well. So it's going up about 30 grand a year.
Which is factored into your lease.
Yep, that's right. So you're getting that. Even just the market as well, because the lease might be 5 years on CPI and then you have nothing. But then on the 5th year, you bump it up 15% because the market's moved more. It could be 0. And like I said, I can change that number to 0 and we do it from there. But again, we're just illustrative. The plan will grow and shrink depending on those assumptions. Haven't taken into account depreciation or tax or anything like that. Again, just keeping it simple. You can add all those things in, but if I'm honest, the people that do add those things in, there's too many moving parts for long term to be able to guess that. Like no one's going to pick what interest rate it's going to be for that long and how their portfolio is going to look, how it's going to grow, what cash flow increases they're going to get. So I just do it as a changing plan, and each year you'll change it for the clients depending on what their circumstances are, and you go from there.
Well, my favorite
I got a question around cash. What is it? Rental leases. I'm interested to know how do you actually what's the way to negotiate with the tenant what the annual increase in rent is?
So this is why I recommend a property manager, because they do it all day, every day. They know what the square meter rates are and they know what they can squeeze out of the tenants. It'll just depend on the market. Again, commercial is a weird one because if they're doing a fit out for the property for you, you might sacrifice rental increases from 5 years. Most ones are CPI, or if it's slightly lower, you will then have rental increases on that.
Hello.
I just got delivered a tea.
Oh, you get a tea?
Yeah.
Oh man, I want a tea as well. Where's my cup of tea?
You guys need to get a good girlfriend who still likes you.
I probably can't.
Surprise and delights. I like it. Okay, so what are we looking at here? So hang on, we're 3 years into property one. We've got 46 grand in cash flow, which is accumulated to 130. So we got 132 cash in our offset, and we've also saved an additional 30K.
Yep.
And the thing has grown $60,000. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
So
this sounds too good to be true. Mr. Palise.
So this is correct. And again, there's no unreasonable assumptions here. Like I'm just done 3% growth and the cash flow is the cash flow. So if you keep your tenant, this is what it looks like, again, excluding tax and all that type of stuff. So what I do is I add this up. So those 3 added up. And I'm only taking 70% of this 60,000 because I'm going to refinance this property. So you can't pull out 100% of it. You have to keep the same LVR.
Oh, good point.
So accumulated cash flow, plus the contributions, plus 70% of the growth equity. That's all I'm doing there.
Yeah.
And you use that for deposit for number 2. So then I basically do this as 35% deposit because I'm allowing for stamp duty and purchasing costs. So I divide that by 0.35 to get my purchase price for the next one. And then that comes out at $585,000. And you can see we've refinanced property number 1 back to 70%, and we've got property number 2 now. So now, same scenario, we've got the same thing, but we've got 2 properties now accumulating cash flow, and we've got $10,000. So you can see as we go, another 3 years down the track, we then have $145,000 cash flow from the first one, $77,000 from the second one, and we've saved another $30,000. and we've got 66 plus $35,000 growth. Similar to before, we add the cash flow up plus our savings plus 70% of the growth that we have, and we have $324,000. Divide that by 0.35 for the 35%, so 30% deposit, 5% purchasing costs, and then that comes out at $925,000. And we've refinanced property number 1, property number 2 back to 70%. And then we go. Normally when I get to here with clients, they say, oh, what about my serviceability? This is why commercial is good, because you've got a big cash flow. Your serviceability isn't taking as big as a hit because you're highly cash flow positive. There's also the lease stock loans. So we can go through that in one of those threads as well about how you can kind of keep growing the commercial portfolio a bit easier than residential. And then now year 7, we've got 3.
We don't need to. It's all recorded. And this is the thing. I'm like, holy crap! This is like, no, where else can you find this information? Thank you very much for sharing such gems here, Steve. This is awesome. It's great to see some real world, like real numbers getting crunched and what it actually looks like, because it's so easy to go and fluff over the top of these, but if you don't get the deep dive, you just have no idea.
And this is why, so I don't have to be a salesman in my job. Even though I'm a buyer's agent and it's obviously good to get people excited, I can actually just show them this stuff and then go, okay, this makes sense. This is a good business decision. And then they proceed that way. You don't have to put a sugarcoat. We'll go through the risks as well with the client. So I'll do high interest rates. What happens if there's a vacancy? We'll mitigate that. And then if it does happen, we don't like it, but we can handle it financially.
Yeah.
But now, same thing. We've got 3 properties now at 70%. Similar deal. You've got, I'll zoom out a little bit. We've got the cash flow working for us now. And then you can see after 3 years again, we're going to have
board number 4.
Sorry, what was that?
Board number 4 after 12 years or something. It was this after how many years?
We're at year 9 now. So we've had property 3 for number 3 years. Same thing. Accumulated cash flow on each property over 3 years. We're up to that. So 158K, 84K, 122K. We've saved another 30 grand. The 3% rental increases on those properties for 3 years adds up to 72K, 38K, 56. Same as before. Add that up, plus your savings, plus 70% of your equity to pull out. And then we use that plus 5% purchasing costs, and we buy another one. And that gives us a 1.5 mil portfolio on a 70% loan. So 1.5 mil per property. Purchase, yep. And then this is our done, where we're not going to accumulate anymore. We're going to start paying down or live off the passive income. But you can just see, so no more adding property with just cash flow now. The portfolio is 4.5 million, and our cash flow is $194,000 a year positive.
What didn't I start doing this at 18? Like, what the heck was I doing with my life?
Because you're an idiot.
I feel
stuffed it up.
I feel like the same thing, right? I feel like, what the hell am I doing in this silly residential space when commercial is? Well,
I mean, obviously you need the deposit, but I suppose it's more about the line of thinking. Like, it's just kind of interesting because I suppose it's interesting because so many different strategies, so many ways of doing it. So yeah,
you use residential. Like if I'm a 25-year-old and I don't own any properties, don't go out and buy $1 million property on a 70% loan. If you're aggressive and you can mitigate the risk, go buy 3 properties on 10% deposits and try to accumulate a $3 million portfolio. Because then if instead of getting 3% increases, you get 5 to 10% growth for a few years, you can then use that few $100 grand to then get into this and go from there. But again, this is the game changer. I remember like when I bought my first commercial, like the cafe I was talking about, 440 grand, and it was at the end of the year I had 30 grand sitting in the account. I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Like why was I buying? Like I used to scrimp and try to get a 5.8% yield up to a 6% of my resi to increase my cash flow from 3 grand to 4.5 grand, which really means nothing. I should have went and packed shelves at a supermarket at night and I would have made more than that.
Oh man, the cash flow conversation in the residential space is very interesting. People just go for the highest yield, but You need that growth. If it's not growing,
I've heard before where I send them a property at 5.6% gross yield for residential, and they're like, "Nah, I only want 5.8." And then I send them the spreadsheet. I'm like, "It's literally $550 a year difference. Like just buy it. You're missing the point of residential."
About $11, $10.50 a week, approximately.
Yep. There we go. You're adding fuel to the fire, Jeff, with stuff like that. That's the problem. People look at that, they go, "Oh, I'd like an extra $20 a week or $50 a week cash flow." Like, you're missing the big picture with property. Most people that make the money is from the growth. Unless it's commercial, then you can obviously see you can start making some attractive returns without it.
Because I just think, though, with $10 a week, like, I can't, like, how many properties I'm gonna have to own, like 100 properties, and even then, $10 a week, 10 times, that's only $1,000 a week. Like, I don't know.
But residential works. So if you buy like a neutrally geared portfolio and you grow it to a decent size over 10 years, and the rents have doubled, and each property you're getting $300 a week out of it. So let's just say you have 5 properties, $300 a week. That's $1,500 a week times 52 weeks a year. Then you've got a $78,000 passive income in 10 years from the cash flow, because the rents have doubled and it was neutral at the start. So you can still build passive income, but the growth is what helps you accumulate number 2, number 3, number 4. You're not doing it from having $5,000 a year passive income.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Next one.
Amazing. Well, almost the next one. We got to run into our other fantastic sponsor that we have there.
You
want to see that, man? No, you keep sharing it. Jeff is going to do something. It's going to be my big pretty. Oh, hello, guys. Hang on.
Sorry, Jeff.
I've got to find it now.
I didn't know that.
This live session is sponsored by Scott Agate from Hello House. Scott has created the world's first property negotiation as a service business. So what does that mean? Well, let's think about it. When was the last time you negotiated on anything over $100, let alone a property that is going to be one of the biggest investments of your life? The vendor, they have a trained negotiator on their side in the form of a real estate agent. That's kind of like you stepping into the ring with Mike Tyson after never training a day of boxing in your life. These guys are trained professionals, and that's what they do day in and day out. And this is what Hello House does every single day as well. They negotiate on property to get the best buy price from the real estate agents. Scott Agate, he's the expert negotiator. He has been in this industry since 1995. He owned and operated 3 Bell franchises. Scott was the guy that was teaching these real estate agents all these agent games. He knows all of their tricks. Having him on your side is going to give you a massive unfair advantage and literally save you tens of thousands of dollars. Unlike other ways of purchasing property, Scott's incentives are aligned with you, the buyer, meaning the more money he saves you, the more money he makes, which is what you want. You need to have those incentives aligned. Scott has kindly offered our group a massive discount on the retainer fee for his service. So if you're looking to buy your next home or investment property, click the link below to get in touch. There we go. Scott's even got that's his Black Friday deal, guys, everyone. Black Friday's happening. Okay. That link is the Black Friday one. Jump on.
I'll admit, so I was one of those guys when you first had Scott on, I was just like, I don't need this. I've negotiated hundreds of deals. Like, I'm not going to pay someone to do that service. And then on the live, he was just dropping gold bombs the whole time. I'm like, wow, I actually don't know what I'm doing.
Man, it's crazy. Because I was talking to Jeff and I'm like, oh, we should, pull the script of all of these episodes and get all the highlights and stuff. And then I pulled someone went through it all, and there was so many gems in this. And I think I paid like $50, and I'm like, I'm just going to pay for this because there's so many bombs that he's dropped that you just have no idea about real estate agents. You just don't know the tricks and games that they're playing until you've sat there and you've had them playing these games to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Have them play you. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, on Jeff.
I was going to say, well, have them play them for you on your behalf. So having recently sort of sold a property, it's just amazing to see the other. I mean, I've sold a couple in the past, but I've now paid attention to just the little kind of tricks that they sort of they do. It's really it's mind blowing from the other side. When you,
Oh,
when you kind of
what were some of them? Not to
well,
like, what were some of the
it's
key ones?
simply just around. Well, we had an offer on the table, and we probably couldn't really take it. But it was leveraging that offer to then kind of bring the other person up. We're saying, oh, we've got, you're not near this other offer. You're going to have to come up quite a bit. So it's kind of just interesting, and it's just using that kind of language and the tactics and the kind of scarcity of missing out on the deal that I think was able to secure at least an extra 5,000, which was what we think we're talking more than 10%, not 10%, sorry, 1%.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah,
well, have we still got another thing? Well, let's not go to the DD checklist.
Well, okay.
No, I was thinking.
What do you want to do, Joe?
Well, I was thinking let's have a look at an example, and then we can jump into the due diligence checklist of the example that you actually ran through. Because I can see two things here: one that says crashed, and one that says success. So, what does crashed mean?
So we crashed the deal. We went under contract, subject to due diligence and finance, and we crashed it. So I've chosen this one in particular because it's a warehouse. It's in a warehouse complex. I'll see if I can find a pretty photo for you guys.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Yeah, I'm just going to find a photo for you quickly.
Okay.
So it's in a warehouse.
Full
disclosure, Hillcrest, Logan Council, few little bits and pieces, new kind of infrastructure going in, but generally surrounded
by land as well in Logan.
Yep.
Jeez.
So this is one where you normally wouldn't look at it. You go, this is a brand new build, high risk, but the developers built it, put all tenants in all the sheds, and then he's selling them off with tenants. So I specifically chose this one because I didn't want just a standard warehouse. I wanted something a little bit out the box because we can still talk about the warehouse kind of due diligence, but we've got an extra factor on it. So for this one, it's a pizza cafe shop, effectively. So it's like in the complex. It's on a main road. They're doing really well. Like, we stalked their social media. We spoke with the owner. Business is booming for them. But it's effectively a warehouse here. There's one out the back as well, which we're also purchasing just because we want to own the whole front block. But this whole front section is demountable, and it's exclusive area from the complex. So they've got access to this and this area. Yeah.
Sorry, just to stop, one thing you said there. You wanted to own the whole front of the complex. Why?
I'll show you. So we actually bought two. I'll see if I can find a little photo.
You could have.
No, so this is the back end. There's an empty warehouse, a storage warehouse, and then the pizza shop's on the front. We didn't have to buy that, but when we spoke to the tenant, he's like, I'd love some extra space, and this one was for sale vacant just because it's a small little storage warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
So we went under contract on that one as well. It's $80,000 just because we wanted to own the whole little front block of the building.
Yeah, and if the pizza shop grows, he's going to be hamstrung because he's like, well, we're at a scale where we need to move out now, but you can't provide us any extra space.
Yep, and he needed the space already, but it also gives us versatility in the future because if we want to get, say, like a mechanic or something like that, them having an extra shed and kind of carport will give them more versatility in the future. So that's a bit of a risk mitigation. So even though the client was spending $80,000 on a vacant one, it gives him kind of future stability, and he could afford it. So we went ahead with that one.
And this is actually a good little question for people who are thinking of going in their own. Did your guy come up with that idea? Was that your idea? Like, how do you?
No, that was my idea. So we saw that it was available. I put in some offers on negotiated, and then what reaffirmed it was when we spoke with the tenant and we said, hey, we're considering buying the one behind it as well. He's like, love it. I'd rent that off you. I need the extra space. So that was kind of the push I gave to the client of like, hey, I'd buy this. And then in addition, we get that versatility of it can become anything. It can become like a fabricator or a car mechanic, or it just gives us a bit more access to it.
De-risks it a lot more as well.
Yep, exactly right. But in terms of cash flow, hurts because you're spending $80,000 extra with no guarantee rental return on it yet.
Yeah.
Theoretically, you could try to under the due diligence. We crashed this one though. Get him to try to sign a lease and do all that stuff to give you some reassurance, but would have been a bit too chaotic, and we crashed this one anyway. So we'll go into why we did that. But on the whole, on paper, I really like this property. Like, it's quite cheap. We'll have a look.
Take it through the numbers.
Yep. So I'll just give you an overview. Like, this is what we do for due diligence. We also supply a Dropbox with notes. So this is just a summary of all the due diligence. There will be about 100 files in the Dropbox that we kind of cross-check and have to go through. So look at the suburb, look at the area. So this is what I'm talking about, the little storage one.
I think Terry Reese likes Hillcrest. I think he's a bit of a fan.
Yeah, it's not a bad area. I own a property in Eagleby and in Waterford, a residential property. I don't mind the area. They're just cheap little kind of houses you buy. Well, I bought it a few years ago for $250 and $270. So you still get some little decent growth out of them. They both rent for $350, $360, probably worth $340, $350 now. So not a bad little return over a few years. So this is the Cafe Pod one. And like I said, it's a bit of a special, where, as I mentioned before, like I'd stick with 80 square meters. This is an out the box one. And that's why I chose it, because it's small area, got an exclusive area. There's a storage shed. And then there's another storage one behind it that we bought. So
when you say exclusive, do you mean like it's an area where people can go that other people can't?
So the body corporate has given us exclusive access to this front area. And because this is effectively a demountable, they've got exclusive area to that. Good question, though. This is also why we crushed the property. So we'll get into that a little bit later. All right, so we'll look at that.
10 points to Jeff.
Yeah, really, really well done. And then we just look at the rents and things like that. From memory, it was about a 6% net return. So bought the pizza shop for 302 grand, and it gives you about 25 grand income per year. And then obviously the empty storage shed behind it, negative. So we looked at that.
The lease, you got a 5 by 5 by 5 by 5 by 5. Is that what they?
Yep. 3 5-year leases. Still got good run on it. Good 3.5, 4 years kind of left to run on it, which is good.
Probably should have.
So what's that 4.5 grand debt?
So that's because there's no tenant. So it is.
That's what you're paying in your interest. So it's 24 plus the negative 4 grand.
Yeah,
so it's
because
like
the outgoings on that, they're still gonna you're gonna have to pay body corporate fees on that shed because it's part of a body corporate complex. So that's looking at council rates, water rates, strata fees, all that type of stuff.
Yep.
So we got that. This is just analysis of the area. So that's where you go through the infrastructure, what future developments are coming up, access to different locations and how long it takes to go places, saturation of the area, how many arterial roads you have going to the property. You do all that kind of high level analysis just to make sure, fundamentals for this property long-term are there. Check zoning because you want to potentially see if there's any future zoning changes that might benefit. Something like this, not as important because you're not buying freestanding. If I was buying like a freestanding warehouse or retail, very important then, because then you've got development potential. Whereas this one, you're not going to develop. You just want to make sure that maybe they're not going to have an oversupply. So there's not going to be a big patch of land where they can build another 300 warehouses. But as you can see from this, like most of it's saturated by, I think there was one little area from memory they could have built out, but that was kind of it. So fairly good saturation. Not a bad area.
Where did you get the maps? You got the maps from the council website?
Council websites most have that. We'll also speak with a town planner on each property as well, just to get a feel, because they know way more than me. Like there's no way I'm going to know every detail about Hillcrest in Logan. So you speak with someone on the ground who goes, oh yeah, they're doing this, they're building this road, and mitigate it that way as well. So like very important for retail, especially because if they're building like a highway and they're going to divert traffic from like the road traffic from your retail, you're going to lose effectively the advertising of having your place on a main road. So you look at stuff like that. Flood checks, zoning checks, all that type of stuff as well. Get your service contracts, look at the site, how it's laid out. Check titles. So this is where I was talking about before. So they're all the standard warehouses. And we were buying this front section. And then we bought the back one as well because I thought it'd be much more versatile to own that whole little block.
So is that what it actually looks like? So that is literally like there's grass in between those two sites, like between 102.
So there's parking lots. So this is all concrete. This is the whole site's concrete. There's parking lots there. There's parking lots on this side. You go from there, and then that's boom.
Well, that's great. And if those places are fully leased, then you've got all these customers coming to eat the lunch.
Yep. So we do the lease review. We'll also get the legal professional to do a lease review as well. We'll look at high level and just think, but again, we're not solicitors. So we just kind of point out all the things that we see, and then the solicitor will do a proper check. And then we look at the tenancy mix in the complex. So you can just see kind of who's renting what. We'll also get to it later, but you also check the comparable, what they're paying per rent, what they paid for when they bought it or when they sold it. Look at competition in the area. So we're looking at, okay, how many fast food places are nearby? What's the risk profile for this business long term?
And how do you quantify that type of thing?
This is the hard thing with commercial, Joe. It's a bit more of an art where you got to have a bit of business acumen, a bit of kind of foresight, but just try to choose the best you can. And this is why I chose this one in particular, because it's not like I'm buying a retail strip where there's 10 shops in a row and it's pretty easy to go, that's comparable to this one. All these are completely different. Some of them are retail. One's part of a shopping center. It's just to get a good feel. Like if this was a cafe and there was 10 cafes around it, you might go, oh, I'm actually going to get someone on the ground to go check out the other cafes to see how they're doing. Because if they're all struggling and then your owner's like, oh yeah, we're going all right, probably walk away from that deal because it's oversaturated. So that's the kind of long-term look you got to have on it as well. Looking at the kind of local council area and the growth factors, and this is what I've mentioned before about the infrastructure and jobs and unemployment and all that type of stuff, what industry's going on. Cross-check all the documents.
This is great. Well, guys, everyone that's been on this, we've covered off a whole range of topics and scenarios in the commercial space, and we're going deep into the detail here, which is exactly what we promised. We are not doing anything that we haven't promised. So please pop in the comments any kind of questions that you've got about this deal, about commercial property in any way. It'll be great to get some of your thoughts and insights on that as well.
About Steve's beard as well. Like if you want to know how to grow a beard like Steve's, we can tell you how to do that.
I think you have to be born that way. I think it's you wake up one day and there it is.
You need either Italian or Hungarian genes in you.
No, we can arrange that.
Okay, what are we looking at here, Steve?
This is the nitty-gritty of just cross-checking all the figures. So you get the body corporate reports and you cross-check the admin sinking funds and things like that, and you make sure the tenant's actually paying them, and you cross-check all that type of stuff. Check if there's special levies coming up in the future, what's going on at the site. Obviously, do your building pest inspection, things like that. But then we'll cross-check with the notices on the properties what we're getting.
Do you find much discrepancies from when you do this?
Quite a lot. Mainly not so much from the tenant ledger, normally from the information memorandum that the agent supplies at the start. They always undercook the numbers. And if it's a gross lease, then it's very, very important. If it's a net lease and the tenant's paying, not as crucial. But again, still want to be mindful of it. I like to cross the T's and dot the I's, even if it doesn't affect me, because if the property does go vacant, that cost will be passed on to me. So check all the body corporate stuff.
Do you ever see the tenant, the real estate agent mess it up and underquote and under?
Yeah. Well, I had a big one. I bought a $3 million one a few weeks ago, and the rent was $220,000, and we actually he overcooked the outgoings by about $20,000. We actually got an extra $20,000 a year out of it.
It's interesting that you have a tenant check for the because I don't know, is that a bit obviously he's not going to say, business is absolutely going terribly. That's the reason I'm selling it. So
they will. Why? What incentive for him to lie to you? If anything, they actually, when they're doing well, they're more likely to cry poor, because when they get to lease renewal, they say, oh, business is struggling, we need a rent reduction, we're not going to stay here long term. So most of the time they cry poor. It's very rare that someone says, oh yeah, we're going amazing, charge us more rent, we can afford it. So
I've noticed an error checking Schnitzel. I think Schnitzel spelled wrong. Oh, no, it's probably spelled right now. Sorry.
You're focusing on the big issues, Jeff.
I love
they are the big issues. Yeah, it's how it tastes, Jeff. It's all about how it tastes.
Yeah. So we have a good chat with them, about an hour chat. We have about 20 questions we go through, but we do the big ones kind of here for you. There you go. So there's the storage unit where they're happy to rent it out. Check the rental ledgers to make sure all the numbers we were just presenting then, they're actually paying into the property manager's account or the owner's account. Credit history check on the owner and the business, just to see if they've ever kind of went dissolved or went into liquidation or anything like that. That can give you a bit of risk. Check their insurances, what insurance they have on liability and all that type of stuff. So that's checking the insurance for the actual business park, the industrial warehouse. So it's called certificate of currency. It's basically insurance for the industrial location. So how much they're insuring it for. Make sure, is that high enough that if something happens to the whole property, so it burns down, it's going to get built again. and then I'll cross-check that. I've got a commercial broker that I work with. He'll cross-check, and then he can even offer insurances to cover stuff like that. So there are similar types of landlord insurance for commercial, but they're quite cheap, but they just cover some of those kind of outliers. This is where most people kind of get caught up on, is they're checking the comparables, because like I said, this one I chose it in particular because there's no other comparables. This one is a really weird thumb suck kind of figure. So we're trying to compare it with retail and some industrial, because it's sort of somewhere in between. So we just want to get an idea of square meter rates for what people are paying per square meter and things like that. What really happened, and we'll talk about that now, is because we've got exclusive use area for that spot, you don't actually own that. So that exclusive use area outside where they have the tables and they've built the demountable, you don't actually have that on title. So theoretically, they can take that away at any time. So the bottleneck we ran into on this one is when we get to valuation, they didn't take that into account for the valuation. So all that they're looking at is two little kind of 30 square meter sheds and not looking at anything else. So depending on what way they do their valuation, so there's a few ways. You can obviously do like comparable sales method, or you can do it of square meter rates, or you can do like land plus cost value and things like that. When they're looking at the other 30 square meter ones in the shed, even though we've got access to like 100 square meters, they're using the other comparables. So the valuation on this one actually came in about half of what we had. So we made the call and we actually just crashed on it. So even though I really like the property, and I can't see there ever being an issue with this property long term, because there's no reason why they just take away your little exclusive area. Finance for this one didn't make sense. So might make sense for someone if they're a cash buyer or they want to make up that difference just to have a nice little cash flow on. But if you're trying to leverage and keep growing your portfolio, again, not right for this client, because we want to keep buying properties. They're in the accumulation stage. We actually crushed this deal. So even though everything stacked up nicely, that didn't, and that was enough to walk away from the deal.
And would this be suitable for a different client?
Yeah, like you said, cash buyer. So.
Yeah, it is, as long as they're willing to take on the risk that in 5 years' time, they like, because you never know what's going to happen. What might happen is one of the other tenants might complain about their exclusive use area because it's a pizza shop and they're open till 10 p.m. at night kind of thing. They might say, oh, no, we're not happy with people congregating around our warehouse at 10 p.m. at night, or there's a bit of riffraff or whatever it may be, and it could theoretically be taken away, and you're going to be left with a little 30-meter square shed that you've kind of paid a bit too much for. So yeah, it is that weird wavering, like, do we go, do we not go? On the whole, I like the deal. But again, I personally wouldn't put my money into it, and that's what I said to my client. I go, like, I wouldn't actually buy this, even though I really, really like it. I think this has got really good growth prospects, but we walked away from it. So property's still available now. We only crashed on this last week. So any of your listeners, if you're interested, just shoot me an email. I can happy to send you the details and tell you my thoughts on the property and things to look out for, and we can have a chat about that. So this is where we check all the other sale prices.
Recent. God.
Yeah. All the other sale prices in the complex, what they paid for per square meter, check the rents. So we check all the similar rents in the area to try to get an idea of square meter rates. Are we paying fair market price? Make sure they're not overpaying rent, because when you get to the end of the lease review, they're going to reduce the rent down to market rate, and that's effectively going to affect your capital growth out of the property. But again, this one's a bit different because it had that exclusive area. Many comparables you can, and don't sue me if I do something wrong.
Pretty face. There it is.
All good.
Oh,
another one?
That was a lot. Oh, I don't know if I can take another one. This is one you're going to take.
Yeah. So this is literally a summary of the due diligence. You can see from the due diligence report, there's way more to it than this. This is just like, if I send someone a 70-page report with all the documents, they're just going to go and not buy it just because it's too much. So we keep it simple. That way, if they've got any questions, the folder's there with all the files. They can check it, or I can walk them through it. So that's fine. I've chosen this one in particular because it's a bit of a different one outside the box. So it's retail, but it's not in a retail strip. It's actually a house. So it's a house zoned for commercial use. And you get a lot of clients that go, I want to buy residential, get better capital growth. Cool. If next door doubles in price, I can almost guarantee you this one's going to double in price as well, because you can always rip down the sign and put some beds in it and it becomes a house. So this one's a little bit different. This one's in Wynnum, which is East Brisbane. So this one settled a couple of weeks ago. Same deal as before. We look at the suburb. We kind of go through the area. This is a bike shop, so the main shop's got all the bikes in it. Big back car park for the clients and things like that. It's got a coffee cart that they operate on weekends, so they get a lot of the road cycle crews that kind of come in and they have their coffees on Saturday and Sunday mornings and things like that. So a little kind of dual income there. Same deal as the last one. We just go through, we tick all the boxes, we check out the tenant, the lease terms. This one's a fresh 3-year lease as part of the deal that we negotiated under due diligence. So they actually only have about 6 months left. And that's actually worth a point of noting. A lot of people will walk away from a deal because they go, oh, it's only 6 months left. I'm not going to be able to find it.
How long had they been there?
They've been there for, I think, 15 years. Will be in the report.
Okay. So
however, the current owners sold the business a few years ago to a new owner who was basically one of their employees. So business is still doing well, just there's a new owner. So again, that's part of due diligence.
Maybe this is a good. I don't know if we can go through like the valuation. How did they get to 910,000 as the purchase price for this property?
So that's part of my job, is trying to find those comparables. So we'll get to that later on. So that's when you look at. So I look at retail, and then I look at the cost of residential, and then you try to find the point. Then you try to say, okay, is this fair market rent? And if the retails are selling for, this is about a 6% net yield, cool. If they're selling for 6%, I generally work off cap rate if it's fair, unless there's a value add. This one would actually probably buy it at a lower net yield than, say, a retail in a strip shop, because this has got a land component, development opportunity, could convert this to medical, literally knock it down and build duplexes and things like that. So like, it's a little bit of out the box one.
Why would the person be selling it with such a little lease left over? Like, why wouldn't they just wait?
Again, it's case by case. Sometimes they need the money. Yeah. Other times they just the way it is. Like
trying to roll into another deal.
Yeah, but why
does anybody sell a property? I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, they might have decided they put it on when there was a year left, and then by the time the actual property settles, it gets too close to the period. It's so grey. Like most people will try to sell it with about 18 months because they think that's long enough to get it done. But I look at these deals, the ones where I can kind of maybe fabricate a better deal or nothing, especially in a hot market where there's not much. If I can do a sweet little deal like this where we get 3 years rent and it's guaranteed, awesome. It's a nice little deal. Same thing as before. We look at the area, what's going on. You can just see here. So you've got all those retail and industrial shops, but we're near that, but we're not quite that. So we can still basically piggyback off that for that as well. So there might be some businesses in here that complement this, or it can just be anything. It could be a medical center, or you can convert it to a vet because of a big backyard.
It's a corner block as well.
Corner block as well, yeah. So another tick. And then to answer your question, Joe, about valuation, this is why commercial is so hard, because there's so many moving parts. If this property was one of these, same tenant, but sitting in one of these, that's a lot easier to value, because I can try to find some square meter rates in this block and go from there. But it's not, it's a house. So I start looking at a house, but you're paying a premium for a house as well. So houses here go for about, actually, I think we do that in the report. They go for about 700,000.
And also you've got to factor in the zoning as well, because if they've zoned the whole thing, commercial, then that's a bit of risk.
So houses are going for 700,000. So if you were to convert this back to a residential property, you've effectively lost 200,000, because you're paying a premium because you're getting twice as much rent out of it as well. So that's
how much would it cost to convert this property? So next door, right? They're in the same zoning. How much would it cost? Well, this is going a bit, but to convert it into a similar place.
Depends on what it is.
Yeah. So again, it depends, but you still need council approval. So it's not as simple as you put the tenant in there. You still need council approval, and then your business. This is part of the due diligence. You need to check that the business is registered with the council, because they might not like certain tenants. Like if that was a brothel, for instance, they might reject it. So like it depends on what the business is. And that's why you cross-check, because I've had a lot of the times, like a lot of them are gyms, like CrossFit gyms and stuff like that. They just don't get approval. So they go in there, they rent a warehouse and they start working out. you still need approval for something like that. So,
in all fairness, this one has Lycra as well.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, similar as before. We just go through the rigmarole, check leases, check the outgoings, do as many checks as we can to make sure we're happy. Look at competition in the area, see what's going on. Not a bad spot at Brisbane as well. People can, in the comments, have a bit of a whinge if they like Wynnum or don't like it. Looked at the other bike stores because we want to see the area is not too saturated. On this one, we actually spoke with a couple of the other businesses just to see our business going. Then we spoke with the owner on this one.
Yeah, my brother runs a bike shop, and he says it's been absolutely mental during COVID.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they said as well. Like everyone working from home is just like, oh, let's buy a fancy bike, and these little residential ones where people can get it quick as opposed to ordering online and you can physically touch it. Like people don't want to just go buy a bike online and not know how it feels, looks, weight, balance, all that type of stuff. So they go in and they look at 20 of them and make their choice that way. And people are short; they don't want to wait 2 months as well. They just want to get it and ride out the next day. Tenant check, same thing. We look at all their history, speak with the tenant, check their rental ledgers, insurances, much the same as before. So what we're talking about with trying to get some comparables. And you can see they vary. Some of the retail sell for 1.25, 700 grand, 432 for this little tiny one. Again, it's actually quite tough, but it's commercial, it's investing. You have to do as much due diligence as you can, and then you just pull the trigger. And as long as fundamentals are there long term, you should be right. Like if this property goes to 1.8 million in the next 15 years, it doesn't matter if we spent 750 on it or 950. We've still done really well in terms of our cash flow and growth. So I'll never get too caught up on purchase price. I'm more than happy to buy a deal at 30 grand more than the market rate if I think it's a really rock solid long-term deal, because the cash flow of this property will pay that back anyway within the first year. Comparable rents, rental comparables, get some square meter rates. Don't sue me, please. That's the end. And
there we go.
Which one are we?
Can't I? Get back to my pretty face.
Wow. Yeah.
That went quick, didn't it? Hour and 10 minutes already.
I don't even know where to go from here.
Should we go? I mean, I know we've got the due diligence checklist. What kind of questions do people have around commercial? Because I think one that I have that a lot of people will have and have heard of is lease doc and no doc, because those are kind of potential advantages of commercial. So how in your experience, how those two kind of worked, and what are the pitfalls of those two loan options?
So they're good options if you're really strapped for your serviceability, because they take the lease heavily into account. The negative with them is, so say we buy something on a 3-year lease, they give you a 3-year loan term for that property. And then at the end of the 3 years, you need to go back and get another loan for it. So typically another valuation and things like that. What people don't tell you, that all works well where you've got the tenant and they stay on long term. If you don't have the tenant and they leave, banks hike up the interest rate a little bit. So like you might be on a 2.8%, they might hike it up to 3.5%, and you pay that until you get a tenant, and then you go back and refinance and you go again. Theoretically, they could take that property from you if they wanted. They could sell it off. They don't. They work with you. But much like residential, if you stop paying your mortgage, like say you can't afford the interest repayments on that higher interest rate and it's vacant, you miss a few bank statements, so a few payments, they could sell the property and take it from under your feet. Again, I've never had any client or know of anyone that's happened to. I've just heard from brokers that it does happen. So just be mindful of that in your risk mitigation. Same for no doc. They're just looking at even less of your personal circumstances, but they're good if you're willing to take that risk and you want to keep growing the portfolio. So if you're at your glass ceiling in terms of your lending for your serviceability with your resi portfolio, and you want to squeeze out 1 or 2 commercial properties because you think you're onto a winner, they're good options, but just be mindful of the interest rates and the risk for them, because it can get expensive as well. Valuations cost 800 to 2 grand. So could take that into account every 3 years if it's a short lease. You got a 5 or 10 year lease, beauty. If you got a 2-year lease by 2-year lease, probably reconsider. And if you're struggling to buy something on a 2-year lease, probably reassess what you're buying anyway.
Yeah.
I've got the due diligence checklist if you want me to quickly scroll through that so if people get an idea of things to check for, or happy to answer the questions.
Well, 3 questions in, because this might be a good one to cover off. Well, let's let the audience decide, because we still have a whole heap of people watching this one. Do you want to see the due diligence checklist, or do you want us to run another session with Steve doing a bit of a deeper dive on it? That is the real question. One of my questions was around well, one of the questions of the audience before was actually like, how do you evaluate a customer's a business for a commercial property? Like, how do you do it?
You mean the tenant's business?
Yeah, sorry, tenant's business, not client.
Depends what you're buying. So yeah, you can ask for whatever documents you want. So like the first one you'll ask for minimum rental ledger. So like if they're paying their rent on time for the last 3 years on the dot it's due, that's a good sign. And then if you speak with them, they say, yep, business is going well. Again, no incentive to lie. There's tick, tick. A lot of the times, maybe 1 in 3, we actually get the P&L statements from the business as well. So they'll give us that saying, hey, look, we're really profitable, see things like that. I still focus on, once I've ticked those off, I focus on longevity of the industry. So like I don't buy banks and I also don't buy like post offices or petrol stations because I don't think they're going to be there in 10 years' time. So yeah, like, well, when's the last time you've walked into a bank, Joe?
Not long.
Probably 2 years ago. Yeah.
It's been a while. And isn't there rules around like the safe? Because there is
most banks now don't actually hold that much cash. They've got very minimal cash, and if you want to pull that cash, they have to tell them in advance 24 hours so they can get it in. Like the bank can just be like a retail shop, you know, like the NAB retail suburban kind of branch where people go in and they talk with someone in a chair about getting a home loan, things like that. Those have huge floor spaces, and every time you walk past it is empty. And I know from talking to brokers and people in lending is they're reducing the floor space by about 1/3 anyway over the next few years. But again, if there's a value opportunity, there's quite a lot on the market at the moment where they're on 5-year leases. I might roll the dice on that. I go, cool, they've got a really good security for that 5 years, and I know they're probably not going to be there in 5 years, but this location is rock solid, and I think it's going to be a hot market in 5 years. Yeah, we might roll that. And I actually do. I've got one under contract at the moment on a bank in the Sunshine Coast, but that's because I love that market there.
Yeah.
This is actually a really good question. There's one: how common would you say a tenant has broken a lease, and if they do, what happens in that situation? So for that one, it's then case by case, and part of due diligence is checking out what conditions are in the lease for that to exact happen. The ways to mitigate it is on leases, you'll have a bond. So similar to residential, you have a 2, 4, 6 week bond. But then on commercial, you'll also have a bank guarantee. And that can be in the form of a personal guarantee or a company guarantee. So that's someone saying, hey, if we can't afford the rent, I'll cover the lease. I typically prefer the personal guarantees because you can check that person out, see what assets they have, if they've got the ability to pay it off. The risk with the company ones is they could theoretically dissolve that company and declare bankruptcy, and you're not going to get the money out of them, which
and generally there's sole director anyway. So
yeah, that's right. So a lot of savvy investors will know all those tips and tricks. So I try to go after personal one. And if I'm buying something low risk, so I'm on a warehouse and the vacancy period is 3 months, and I've got 3 months bond out of that person, and I've got a bank guarantee, if I lose them, it might take, let's say it takes 5 months to fill it. I'm only out of pocket 2 months. Like, again, that's assuming I don't get the bank guarantee or personal guarantee. It's not going to debilitate me. What normally happens though is they don't just leave. You don't just kind of have a property and then all of a sudden they go, no, I'm done. See you later. And they walk off. There's normally signs. They'll normally start slipping a bit on the rent, and they'll start paying it a few days later or a week later. Or they'll start asking for a price reduction in their lease. They'll go, oh, look, we're actually struggling. Can we have a price reduction? That's a slippery slope as well. You also, one of the parts of investing is you need to know when to call it as well. I've seen so many investors, they go, oh yeah, I'm just giving them the 20% rent reduction. And then a year later, they're down the track. They should have just kicked them out. It's not emotional. And people don't like residential because there's emotion with the tenants, and that's why you can't kick them out. No, it's a business transaction. They've signed an agreement. if I don't pay my mobile phone bill, don't think Optus is not coming after me. So they've signed an agreement. That's part of the game. You do try to work with them if you think they can weather the storm. Like if it's COVID affected or there's good prospects. But if they're just going down a slippery slope, why are you copying a percentage of their losses in their business? It's not your business. It's not you didn't buy it to have their losses.
And I lost it. Had a good one.
Was about the lease, Joe, or about losing a tenant, or about no, it's gone. All right. Well, let's. Tony asked an interesting question about CPI. I think the answer is no to this, but I'm interested in your thoughts, Steve. I don't think it plays that much because what are your thoughts?
No, definitely does. So if you're getting rental increases for CPI and the cap rate of the area is not changing, there's your, in quotations marks, capital growth, assuming there's not like more demand and you outstrip the CPI. But that's a nice little basis for if you're getting 1.4% CPI, you know that property's having that 1.4% growth at the same time as well. So that plays a part. Demand for the type of tenancy, what's on the market, all that type of stuff comes in with commercial.
Yeah.
The question that I was having was around like the COVID situation. How have some of your clients fared during this, crazy pandemic in the commercial space? Because I have heard like some not the greatest news from the commercial front because of COVID. So, how have the guys fared?
I've been somewhat lucky in that sense because mainly what I buy is industrial and suburban retail. And besides when it's lockdowns, most of them have done fairly well. Like I've never bought office CBD or CBD retail. It's just too expensive, overpriced. The yields are too poor. So the ones I've seen, industrial rates have actually tightened during COVID. So most business done there. I've bought a few things like CrossFit gyms and stuff like that work out of a warehouse. COVID hit them. So they obviously shut down shop during lockdowns. And the first lockdown, banks gave a concession where you could delay your interest repayments for the period that there was lockdown. And then the last one you're making up. So they've had to mitigate that. Retail, most of them done fairly all right. Like most of the cafes and things like that have weathered the storm because they just shifted to takeaway, and people not going to the city looked for any excuse to get out of their house and do it there. Barber shops and hairdressers and stuff obviously struggled. Medical still performed as expected, even though there's some Zoom conferencing and things like that, but people don't just not get sick during COVID. So I've had a handful. I've had maybe 10, 15 kind of ones that properties I've bought the last 5-6 years that I've heard the client come back to me saying, hey, this happened, what should you do? And we make a plan, and it's part of the risk with commercial is you mitigate that risk. And I always point out one bad year over 10 years when you're making 30, 50 grand a year cash flow, we can weather it. It feels like it's a lot now because you're not seeing your account going up, but they also forget that their account is up 150 grand over the last few years just from the cash flow. So they can just look at it, instead of 150, they've got 130 grand and they weather the storm.
Yeah, and it's all about making sure that you have that buffer.
Yeah. There's a question. I'm interested in this one. I think you answered in what would Steve do, and Dino sort of mentioned here about franchise or franchisee situation. What is there anything you sort of need to factor in when you're doing that, or what are your thoughts on this?
No, so most the franchisee ones, they're low risk because a lot of the times the leases are backed by the franchisor, so the whole head company. Again, case by case, but I bought a Baker's Delight that settled about a month ago. That was backed by Baker's Delight, the corporation.
Making some dough.
Yep, making some dough. But very unlikely if that business struggles, they're not going to pay that out. So there's that backing for that. There's the argument, if they leave and they're not running a good business, but it's no different to any other business operating. Like you want to make sure the fundamentals are there, they're doing well. That just has a nice security that you've got a big company saying, oh yeah, we'll pay out that lease if they struggle.
Sorry, Baker's Delight's company is called Bacon Some Dough.
No, Jeff was just making a joke, wasn't he?
I said making some dough.
Oh, that would be just Absolutely fantastic. Well, it's like everyone gets a trust, right? And you can call the trust whatever the hell you want. So, okay, fine. Next trust I create, I'm calling it making some dough, and I'll buy a bakery. I'll buy a bakery through you, Steve. That's the best trust name ever.
Maybe AUS Property Investors should buy a commercial.
So this is the point where saying, so buying something like a bakery, really attractive because they've had an expensive fit out. They've spent 200 grand on ovens and fit out and things like that. The question you're going to come up with, if they ever leave and all that equipment's still there, do you leave it and try to get someone who can versatile and use it, or do you strip out all that equipment and start again? And then that changes whether it's a cafe or a bakery or a cold storage. Like they might have a big cold storage shed in the back, which are really expensive. Do you leave that? And again, this is where a good property manager comes in. They'll come in and be like, oh, cool, we can advertise this a few ways. There's an empty shell or with this and offer incentives and do all that type of stuff. So this is the art of commercial, is trying to understand all that as well when you're buying.
What are some of the what are some of the big mistakes that you see people making in the commercial space? One, obviously going alone, because this is a precarious place. Like I feel like that pizza shop, I'm all over it. I'll take 3. And then all of a sudden I end up with 30 square meters rather than 80 square meters of what I should have.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the mistakes you see, everyday normal investors making?
Most people they get the wool pulled over their eyes just on the cash flow. They look at that and go, oh, look, I'm buying a 7% yield. The market's 6%. I'm doing really, really well. And I actually had this with a client the other day. I found a property that was 7% and the market's 6%. And I sent it to him. And I'm just like, just FYI, I believe there's going to be something very wrong with this property when we do due diligence, because sellers aren't idiots. They're not just selling it for dirt cheap. And I imagine when we find something, the tenant's going to leave, or there's not going to be a bond on the lease or something. There's a reason why it's a high yield. So most people go on real commercial. They find a deal and they go, oh, this is great. I'm buying really well. And they're not. They're not geniuses. They're not finding this unicorn. There's professionals like me. Like I got a team of multiple people that sit there on real commercial every day looking at the deals. They're not going to pick up the bargain. The market's just too hot. So it's just, I say this 1,000 times, it's just not doing due diligence on it. They think it's like resi where you find it, negotiate it, cool, I'm going to be sweet. No, you need to go through all those things I just showed you.
Got an interesting question from Joel, and I kind of, I think I know the answer to this, but I'll let you answer it anyway. How has commercial capital growth gone compared to resi growth? I suppose it's hard to answer.
So yeah, that's it. So it depends what type of commercial. Like high density office is not going to grow the same as that bike shop I just showed you. Like for like, they're generally on par. We've seen between 4.5 and 6.5% growth long term, and they kind of have to be. Like if you've got an industrial warehouse for 500 grand and the houses next to it are 700,000, they're not going to go to 1.5 mil, and then the industrial shed going to sit there for 500,000, because everyone sitting in that 1.5 mil is going to look at that and go, "Oh, that's cheap. I'm going to buy that." And that's why the markets move slightly different times. But if you're buying the fundamentals, you still got a land component and the fundamentals there, you get good capital growth. Commercial in the last year has grown about 20%. Like it's just absolutely nuts at the moment. And then we'll probably have 3 or 4 years worth of good growth and then nothing. But again, depends on the type, depends on what you're buying. Office is completely different to retail, which is completely different to suburban retail, which is different to industrial. Different size industrials are going to have different growth factors and demand. Where you buy, if you're buying near a port or an airport, or you're servicing a residential area, there's something about, but it's a misconception you don't get capital growth. Go back and look at 10 years, the price of any industrial warehouse, and you'll find it's basically doubled. Most locations.
So what does that growth look like? Because if the valuation is based on the rent that's coming in, you see it as like a 3-year lease at X amount of dollars, and then that means it's going to be a 7% yield, which means the place is worth $1 million. But then when the new release comes, it's worth $1.5 million because the lease rent has raised.
So twofold. One is when the rent goes up, so that equates if the cap rates, but then demand for that property can compress the cap rates. So where I was buying stuff at 7% 2 years ago, now buying at 6%, that's 1/6 of growth that's come on that property with no rental changes. So you get compression in the market, and that can be affected by interest rates, for simple. Like me buying a 7% one 3 years ago on a 3.5% interest rate, is actually the same cash return in your pocket as buying one now on a 2.6% interest rate. So the yields compress, the cap rate compresses, and then the comparable sales that they use are higher priced for the same return. So it's kind of twofold. It's balancing that, but just on average, you'll move with the market.
It's kind of like a seesaw,
Yeah, I was going to say, do you see like a big flow-on effect from what happens with the interest rates?
Yeah, it just means it's more attractive. So people start looking at money. One of the biggest factors, and people aren't talking about it, is the residential market growing. So people in Sydney, Melbourne that are seeing their properties grow 10, 20%, they're now looking at $2 million houses going, well, do I want to buy something on a 3% gross yield? I've got this 500 grand equity. And then you've got idiots like me being like, yeah, buy 6% net yielding stuff. And then they shifting there. So then they start moving their money there. So basically, whenever there's good sentiment in the market, people making money from residential then shift money into commercial. Commercial's got good sentiment. Interest rates have been lowering, so that even brings more attractive kind of nature to it. So you get we're in this kind of storm in a teacup situation. Whereas I personally am a bit of a pessimist. I don't think this is going to last forever. I think we've got in a few years, and then we're going to have a bit of a flat period for 5-10 years.
Interesting.
God.
Yeah, I want to go a bit more. I want to go a bit more micro because I'm interested to know, what are your thoughts on assets like your Bunnings, like your McDonald's? What are your thoughts on those type of assets?
Most people can't afford them, so I don't look at them. So I bought a few. I bought one Bunnings Trade Centre in Perth, which is just like the ones where the tradies go to. It's basically a big storage shed. They come up affordable because they have like little kind of satellite ones. The yields on those are normally quite low. Like if you buy one of the big dog ones, like we're talking 2.5 to 3.5% net yields, but you're on 10-year leases and pretty much guaranteed to have the tenant long term. Like there's no way that it's stripping out a McDonald's and then knocking it down or something like that.
And they can kind of ask what they want almost.
Yeah, because I always get asked, I'm like, oh, if I spend more, do I get a better yield? It's sort of the opposite because the better the tenant, the more reliable it is. There's more demand, and those big players that have millions and millions of dollars cash just to throw in a deal, they're just looking at ROIs. So they actually don't care. When I showed you that 13% ROI before, they look at that and they buy a 3.51 and they get their 8% ROI that's guaranteed. They're happy with that, and then they can lend capital out to other people, and then the circle of finance is complete.
Get us into that circle, Palise. I want in, mate. I want in.
But again, it's case by case. Instead of going out and spending $10 million on a McDonald's that gives me a 3% return, I'd rather go out and buy 10 $1 million ones on a 6% and have twice the cash flow.
Yeah.
So why do people buy that? Because they want the more certainty, I suppose. Is that kind of why they buy?
Yeah, it's a different level of safety, and the people are operating in different realms. It's like, why would someone buy a 300 grand warehouse with a pizza tenant when you can, for $2 million, get a multi-tenancy retail strip? You own the whole strip. Like there's pros and cons of each. It's just different realm.
Yeah, and then you're going into syndicates and you've got a whole heap of mess of capital.
People have a preconceived notion as well. Like if I show some of the properties I buy to some really high net worth guys, they turn their nose down at you like, oh, I'd never buy something like that. Same as residential. You show a Logan house to someone that likes inner ring CBD and they say, oh, don't buy that bloody shithole. It's just everyone's got a preconceived notion.
I love it. Mate, I feel like we've taken way too much of your time and you've given us way too much value here that we don't deserve it.
Oh, Joe, I didn't speak to yourself, Joe. I mean, I feel like I am valuable, Joe.
I valued the crap out of that. I'm going to rewatch this one because there was so much, there was so much value that I can't keep up. I just can't keep up. So anyone, if you have any comments or questions to ask the big Steve Palise, pop. Oh, we got one more. Well, we can
throw one more.
We can have one more after the one more. Although Steve has had his coffee, he's had an extra tea, obviously brought in for him, so he's ready to rock and roll. But let's go to that. Let's go to that comment. But anyone else has got any comments, mate? Pop in. There's Steve, is there anything? Is there anything, Steve, that we haven't covered off that you'd like to touch on?
Yes, about 3 hours worth of due diligence checklist.
Steve, that's the next session. You see what
I reckon we do it. I reckon let's do just one on. Let's do a case study of I find a deal and I'll run through everything. I'll check, and then the whole process. Once we go into contract, stuff to check prior to contract, and then post contract, and then how it all works with finance, checking, cross checking, talking to the tenant, getting all the documents, and do all that type of stuff. But
mate, they want to record phone calls. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. If they want a bit of a sneak peek, like I said, go on my website. I've got the due diligence checklist. All the spreadsheets you saw are free access. You can have a play with them. It'll just give you a kind of good, kind of well-rounded nature of, cool, this is the stuff I have to look at.
Mr. DJ, no. What was your question? I didn't write it.
Well, it's not going to be up. It's further up, mate. It's actually, I think I can do it. I have a freehold service station. I have approximately 500. Yeah, you badmouth it. But the question is, you've got to get access to that money you set. Well, I'm fairly sure you have to get access to the money yourself to be able to release that stuff. But okay, I'll read it out. I have a freehold service station. I have approximately 500K equity build up. The trouble is, if I want to refinance it and use the equity, I'm required to, 1, pay $5,000 for a commercial valuation, and 2, pay 25 to 30 grand for an environmental report. How can I afford it? Because how am I going to get the refinance if I can't get the cash? But I can't afford the cash because I haven't got the refinance.
So is the question how you get the money, or is the question, is it, I don't know, or does he own?
The question is, how do I get the money? Well, that's what, that's.
Without being rude, this is one of the reasons why I don't like service stations. There's just so many risks involved with this, and contamination reports, and even selling it. Like, to develop the land, you got to pay hundreds of $1,000s to remove the tanks and things like that. And like I said, I think electric cars are going to kill the industry in 20, 30 years. So he's just going to have to get. If he knows the equity's there, have a chat with some sales agents in the area. So make sure, cool, is it 400 grand equity? Is it $1 million equity? Work out exactly where you are. And if you're comfortable that you can get that money, try to get that, lend from a friend or whatever, go on payback scheme, or do whatever you need to do to get that. Because if you can get the equity, you can pay back whoever gave him the money anyway. But it's part of the commercial game. He's just got because he's got an expensive one to get his valuation. It's what he's going to do. Just it is what it is.
He's saying spending. It sounds like it is. I mean, I don't know about that, but I mean that's not a bad. I would spend. Would I spend 35K to get 500K probably back? I mean, probably yes.
You want to make sure you can get it though, because a lot of lenders don't like banks and refinancing banks, and that's why. So speak with some lenders, speak with some sales agents, make sure that it's there. Check what lease they're on as well. Like if they're on a 2-year lease, probably not worth it. You wait until the end of the 2-year lease, then do it. If they've got 10 years running left on it, then it's probably worth looking at.
A question is, if can I spend the 5K, get the valuation, and then the bank, and then I'll have that valuation to be able to see if I can get the equity release. Will the bank accept that initial valuation that I've done pre-engaging them to get
the environmental report?
The environmental report.
I actually don't know, because I've never bought a petrol station. He'll have to speak with someone in the lending environment that know exactly petrol stations, how they work. And again, make sure you can obviously refinance the property. So even though there's equity there, it doesn't mean you can refinance it. A lender might not be willing to give him the money and take on the risk.
Yeah, I love it, man. And I just wanted to finish on this comment from to pump up his ego and maybe help his beard grow just that extra little bit longer. He said, and this is Joel, so he said, taking a lot out of it really got me thinking it's time instead of using equity and put it into commercial. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to do that too. It's,
yeah. And thanks for your question there, DJ.
Spitballed it.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. This was fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And what other medium do you get this in? There's nowhere else. Steve, have you ever had the chance to deep dive in? AUS Property Investors.
Like I have like with the new clients and stuff, we'll have like a good hour Zoom chat, and I show them all this type of stuff and things like that. Maybe I should do some educational stuff and just send that out and be like, cool, before you talk to me, do this, and then we can have a bit more of a strategy chat.
Yeah. So how do people get in touch with you, Big Steve?
Just stalk me on this group, guys. Just send me a private message and I'll get back to you. Go to the website, do anything you need.
Hang on, we've got another one. My question too. Where's my question? Where's your question?
I think we've got to finish up. I mean, maybe just send. I mean, I don't normally encourage private messages, but
Why don't we do a what would Steve do? So get all the questions we haven't answered, and then next week I can do a what would Steve do post for them.
Done. Let's do it. And we've got to give a book giveaway. I mean, maybe I shouldn't promise you a book giveaway, but yeah, I've loved this session. It's been fantastic to dive into.
Let's get real salesy. If you use the code word free book on my website, boom, free book.
We'll have to do a post though, because Christmas is coming up.
My favorite was Brendan at the beginning. He's like, "Man, I bought the book. This is great." Someone else commented, "Yeah, I bought the book," and then we ran the ad, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't buy it with the discount."
Poor guy. No. All right.
Well, that's it. Are we done, guys? Let's go out there. Let's go buy a commercial property. Have a great night. Have a great day.
See you guys.
Nah, thanks, guys. Have a good one.